hopefully you have that kind of process and that kind of relationship with your leader. So we can talk about that as well. But you can start from that bottom up. Like, do I understand a strategy? Like, what is my part in this whole? What's my piece of the whole puzzle, right? What's my part that's making us move forward?
Today, I'm excited to welcome Karen Friedenberg back to the show. Now, Karen was actually on, I guess, about 3 years ago. I didn't realize it had been that long. But today, Karen and I dive all into the whole topic of sort of strategic planning. So obviously, this time of year is lots of things going on. Typically, with companies looking at how did the 2023 go? What are we looking forward to 2024? And so lots of good stuff in here. Karen lays out a sort of a framework that she likes, and it's very similar to if you might be familiar with ocean planning or something like that. A lot of similarities. So a lot of good stuff in there. A lot of good tips. I think you're going to benefit from this one. Also, if you do need some help with strategic planning, we've got a lot of good content on Gemba Academy, if I can give a really subtle plug. So we've got a whole series of videos on Hoshin Connery or Hoshin planning. And we even have a course dedicated to the X Matrix. Now, I personally love the X Matrix, and that's what we use here at Gemba Academy ourselves for our own strategic planning. So we've got level 1, level 2, level 3, and in that course we walk through in great detail how to navigate that. So that one married up with our Hoshin planning course is going to really get you on the way to having a strong strategic plan. So we'll get Jessica to link those up, and you can watch some of those videos. The first video free of charge if you're not a subscriber. Okay, enough for me. Let's get to the show. Karen, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Ron.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So, I'm excited for today's conversation. It's, I think it's going to be a really appropriate topic given the sort of the time of year and all that we're in. So, but before then, Karen, you know the drill. We like to get things going with our guest sharing a quote. So, what do you have?
Yeah, I have sort of a traditional one and a non-traditional, if that's okay, Ron.
Yeah.
The first traditional I have is begin with the end in mind. So that's
Covey.
Stephen Covey.
Yeah.
So I thought that was appropriate. We'll be talking about, what this is about. And as we're looking out and having a vision, having an end place of where you want to go and how important that is. And not just starting to execute without having that end in mind. And then I have one of my own, actually, if you don't mind. If you don't have the map to where you're going, you'll be steering a boat without a compass. So not only about having the end in mind where you're going, but do you have the plan to get there? Are you measuring along the way? Are you making sure are you course correcting along the way? So I tend to use a lot of analogy around journeys and probably come back to that again.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. All right. Well, Karen, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your background, how you got into all this continuous improvement stuff, and then what you're up to these days.
Yeah, so I have over a 20-year career working both within industry as well as within consulting. I started out at Arthur Andersen Business Consulting. I've had my own consulting firm now for many years, but I also worked within industry, both at Campbell Soup. That's where I started my Lean Six Sigma journey, became a green belt there, and as well as I've worked in some smaller organizations, building out different departments, building out operational effectiveness, excellence types of departments, as well as strategic PMOs. So really have a career in strategy to execution, leveraging a lot of the lean tools. I love to use them not only in my business, but in my everyday. I always looking for it. So when we last talked, I think it was actually about 3 years ago, Ron, I was at iCIMS, and like I said, there I built out our business optimization and strategic PMO, really a transformational PMO. And over the past 6 to 9 months, I've pivoted back into consulting again. I am the founder of Performance Improvement Consulting. So I have a consulting firm, and we're focusing on leading and facilitating companies from strategy to execution, really to improve their business performance. So everything from strategic planning and strategy articulation to the process improvement, executing on the strategy, so project and program management and organizational change management. So we take you through full life cycle, and wherever you need us, we can plug and play in those areas where you may have gaps and need to improve your business performance.
Got it. All right. Well, so as you alluded to, strategy execution is going to be sort of what we dive into today. And so in preparing for this, you and I were sort of going back and forth, and I understand that you've got a strategy execution framework. So I'm wondering if you could just walk us through, high level, what is the framework, and, how did you come up with it?
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah. So I was coming in and really thinking about companies and where they struggle, we put together this framework. It is circular. So kind of thinking continuous improvement, always think about coming back to the beginning at the end. So really of companies ask, like, where do I even start? And when I come into a company, where do I start when I'm starting to consult and advise a company? So that's what the strategy execution framework is, to say, like, okay, are you taking the steps, and maybe where do you have some gaps? Where do you need to shore up your capabilities along so that you're executing flawlessly, right? And your strategy are all going in the same direction. So that's really what the strategy to execution framework is. And I said it's like 4 major steps. And I can walk you through that if you want,
Yeah.
Ron.
Yeah. Let's go through them.
That sounds great. So really starting at that like 12 o'clock split, starting at the top, number one is strategy articulation, right? So the first piece of this is, do you have a strategy? Most companies do. When I come in, I look to see what it is. Mission, vision, values, and purpose. That's typically companies have that, right? It's usually on their website, and companies have that. So that's the first step. So that's that North Star. So always making sure that we're tethering to that North Star about what the company's mission, vision, and values are, and that purpose. But really, the next step is getting into the next level of detail. So we'll ask and start to talk to a company about, okay, do you have a strategic plan? Do you have strategic imperatives and objectives, right? So that could be some typical ones you typically see out there may include increasing their revenues, improving profitability or reducing costs, improving customer service or experience, employee experience, innovation. So what are those? Do they have those determined? And have they started to really break those down into the next level of detail, right? So a lot of times you may have that as high level, but start to not get into the what you want to do and maybe the measurement of what that is, but also the how, really getting into how do you go about executing on that strategy, or what is the components of the strategy. So for example, like if we were to say revenue, like a company's like, yeah, I want to increase my revenues by 20%, or I want to get to a certain dollar revenue. Well, how are you going to get there? Is it by penetrating your existing customers with more products? Is it by finding new customers? Is it through expansion? Whether that be within your own company, new markets, or international expansion? New products, bringing new products to market. And that starts to tell you, by putting those pictures together, where you need to focus and how you prioritize. And really, that's what we'll look for in that strategic plan, is those high-level strategic imperatives, the objectives, the initiatives, and the metrics. And those are usually the components that we'll look for to lead us to see if that strategic plan is sound, or if we need to kind of shore that up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's the 3 o'clock, right? Just from
So as we're going
perspective.
through, if you're kind of visualizing right? So the first part of it is that number one is the strategy out there. And as we're going through and we talk about organizational alignment, really now like going into like 1 o'clock and up to 3 o'clock is that written down, right? How is that communicated? And are we aligned on it? So the next key step is, are we truly aligned as a leadership team on that strategy? And I think that is so important. And in the details, the devil is in the details there, right? So as we start to think about, okay, yeah, everybody can agree to we want to increase revenue, or everybody can kind of agree to we want to reduce costs, but it's the how where you get into it, and then the translation of that into what might be your budgets or your annual operating plan. So are we going to actually put investment behind that? And what are those initiatives that we need to be able to do? Where are the investments we're going to make? Are we budgeted for it? Are the resources allocated to making those things happen? And really that step before you move on to the next step is making sure that your leadership is aligned. And one of the ways, and we prioritized. So those strategic initiatives are really truly large cross-functional types of projects that companies work on. There shouldn't be too many of them. If you have too many, I'm like, then you have too many priorities.
Right.
So prioritization is so key. And what you're not doing is just as important as what you are doing. One of the ways that I've worked with executive leadership teams is laying out those key strategic initiatives I'd say no more than 10, maybe even less than that, and force ranking them, really saying which one is your first most important, which one is your second, third, and down the line. And what that really does is when we have to make trade-offs or when you have to make decisions, it makes those decisions easier because
Mm-hmm.
you're going to put your resources, your money, your time, you're going to go faster potentially on the things that are maybe your top 5 priorities versus maybe your 5 through 10. So that's one of
Mm-hmm.
the ways, that's one of the tactics I use. And so that alignment, that organizational alignment, first at the leadership level, is the next piece
Mm-hmm.
that needs to
Okay.
happen.
Got it. Got it.
Once the leaders are aligned, then we need to make sure we're communicating that to the whole organization. So how is that then getting communicated and translated into the objectives for the rest of the organization? So Ron, as we said, we're kind of sitting here, whether you're listening to this, it's the end of 2023 or going into 2024. Many of you are going through that, review of 2023, how you did and your performance, and then we'll be developing your next year's objectives. So really, many companies do this in different ways, right? And how they structure it. You can pick one. So a lot of companies just have sort of your traditional management business objectives or objectives. Some of them use a framework called the OKR, which is objectives, key performance indicators and results. You may use, some of you, if you're lean, I haven't really seen it in action as, Hoshin planning or Hoshin Connery, different
Mm-hmm.
ways. My last company, we did what was called a plan on a page. So everybody had their objectives aligned to those strategic initiatives, strategic imperatives, or those strategic objectives. And so it starts to translate at the highest level, again, those objectives into initiatives at a high level, and then it starts to say, okay, how do I, as an individual contributor, how am I making sure that we're moving forward as a company towards a strategy? Whether it's what do I do every day, or whether it is a project I'm working on, how can I contribute to moving the
Right.
company forward towards our strategic objectives? And I think that that's really important. So you have that organizational alignment, and that's really the
Mm-hmm.
next step.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Got it. Organizational alignment. So our leaders are aligned. Now we've communicated that and aligned that throughout the organization. So what's next?
Are you ready to take the next step in your lean journey? Now you can, during one of our premier in-person Gemba Academy workshops held at our training center in Keller, Texas. Our certified instructors guide you through the process of taking your lean knowledge and applying directly to your industry with real actionable steps that will benefit you and your organization. Whether you're a seasoned lean practitioner looking for inspiration or just starting out, we have the perfect workshop for you. Sign up at gembaevents.com. That's gembaevents.com.
Now we've communicated that and aligned that throughout the organization. So what's next?
Yeah, so it's determining what those we've determined what those initiatives are. At that point, we've determined what the initiatives are, and we're getting more into the operational alignment. So really now translating that into the operations. And this is where I think lean can really come in, and that's where I use this a lot. So for example, sometimes the strategic objective might be improve customer service, right? They may know they have a problem with delivering the product on time. So this is where I know we had our last time we spoke, Ron, on process improvement. And I know some of those methodologies can really come into play because we may not know why. Why are we not delivering our product on time? But again, it's tied to that key strategic objective of customer experience. We know what the problem is. We're not delivering our product on time. And now we can start to say, okay, our project, our initiative, and we can utilize some of the lean tools to dig into the problem of delivering our product on time. So that's where like the operational alignment comes in. And again, process improvement is a key tool, I believe, in that one.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And does that sort of complete the framework, or do you have more?
I got more. So that's number 2. So number 1 was strategy articulation.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Number 2 is operational alignment. We're sort of at the 6 o'clock now. We're sort of at the, at the 6 o'clock around the dial. And now we move into, so once you have your initiatives, you're aligned. We have people ownership. Okay. So I didn't talk about that piece. Ownership is key. So do we have the owners and the measures? So we know that these are the projects, who's responsible for them, who's sponsoring them, and how we're going to measure that, that we're improving and then going in the right direction. And then it's time to execute, right? Then it's time to say, all right, we've got them and it's time to execute. And that's about executing with excellence. So, we'll look into what kind of structures a company has, right? Do you have a PMO? Do you have a project management office or a program management office? Maybe you're a smaller company, and so a lot of the tech companies have a chief of staff. Some companies don't have that. Some companies are so small, that they don't have that type of structure. But you maybe have the way. So you have to think about like, how are you, number one, going to execute on the projects at the lowest level? Like, making sure you have the structures in place to execute on time, on budget, making sure those projects are successful. And then how are you going to track that those strategic initiatives are moving in the right direction, are being executed and being executed the way you want them to? So that can be done in different ways. I like to sort of use a portfolio management type of approach, which might be what are those strategic objectives, a little bit about them, and then using sort of that red, amber, green, the RAG rating to say, how are we doing on status? What might be some of the blockers that are occurring, and having that, again, that one sheet of paper that the executives can always look at, and leadership as well as the whole organization. We publish this. It's not just like for, the small group of people,
Right.
that are in the C-suite. This is really something that the whole organization should own and know about, and be able to say, oh, I'd be interested in learning more about that initiative. Who could I go to? And they can just look on the piece of paper and say, oh, here's the owner of it. Here's the project manager, or here's the sponsor, and reach out and say, I have something to contribute for this initiative, or I'm doing this thing for this, that could help you out. So I think, again, that communication is such an important part of this. So that's what we'll kind of look at. What are the mechanisms that you have in place to be able to track that you're moving forward in the right direction, right? That we're all rowing the boat in the same direction. If you kind of have a visual of the crew in the skull, right? Everybody rowing the boat in the same direction, and that we haven't veered off course.
And are we winning or are we losing? Right.
Right.
Just as basic as that. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I just look to see that you have some sort of a method. You can use more agile methods, right? Looking at it. But there's lots of different ways to do it, and just something in place to make sure that you are measuring it, you're monitoring, and knowing that we're moving in the right direction to the end goals.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So that gets us, that's like the third piece. It kind of gets you to the 9 o'clock. And now the final stretch is to make it sustainable, right? So this is where organizational change management comes in. And one of the first questions I have on that is, what is your leadership's position on executing strategy? Do they really see it as part of their job? We know that from change management that sponsorship and leadership and the buy-in is one of the most important things. So is leadership making the time for people to execute on the strategy? Is leadership following up? Are they active and visible? So that's sort of some of those digging deeper into some of those types of questions to see that that this is important, and that we again have that mechanism to make this happen. The second part is, do we have a way how are we thinking about bringing our people along for the journey? And this is where organizational change management comes in. I know last time we talked, Ron, I talked about the ProSci methodology, which is one that I tend to use, but I don't think it matters as long as you have something where you're communicating where we're going, that we know that we're getting people ready, and that we're reinforcing that change. So really that sustainability, coming back and making sure that we're, again, checking ourselves, that we have a way of checking ourselves, and that we are sustaining the change. And then we talked about the measurement, right? The measurement piece, not only for the strategy as well as for the individual initiatives. So are we looking at what's happening from a strategy perspective, not only within our own organization, that we can't be so tunnel visioned into just our projects, but has anything changed in the market? Has something happened around us or in our company? And that could be something like macroeconomic, like, a global pandemic, or economic changes, or a war, or, other things like that. But it could also be something within our company, like a merger integration that might change a little bit of what we do. Or an organizational change, or things of that nature. So having those mechanisms to continuously check is really important. So again, whether that be checking at the high level strategy, maybe on a quarterly basis, and having some business reviews and seeing what's working, what's not, do we need to change, what might be changing in our organization and the broader world, or whether that be on a more frequent basis for your own individual initiatives, right? I would assume that you're kind of checking in on those a little bit more clearly, and your own individual objectives as well, that you're tracking towards them. So having those mechanisms, the way to measure, and any type of a program, right, or a methodology to check in on how we're doing. And that really gets us back, because that gets you back to 12 o'clock, then do you need to pivot? Then do you need to pivot? Gets it back. Okay. It's a continuous loop. Is my end goal, is my North Star still the same? Did I move it a little bit? How I got there? Do I need to change that a little bit of how I'm getting there? So that then allows those loops back to make those changes and pivots as needed.
where do you, or where are some potential failure modes that you've seen, like through this whole framework? Like, where have you seen it break down?
Yeah. Well, I think really it's important to set up the stage right from the beginning. I think that alignment piece is extremely important. So when I talk to people who are executing, like kind of down in that number three of executing, one of the biggest issues they have is like, all right, well, we're not all on the same page about this. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have the resources I need. I have blockers. Well, what's the reason why you have those? And probably because you weren't aligned to enough of a level of detail from the start. And you might need to go back to that. Again. Are we really aligned? Kind of come back. Are we truly, truly aligned? Because we would be
Right.
giving your resource, if we really believe this was priority, we would be giving our resources to it. We would
Yeah.
be, we would be making it happen as an organization. So I think that's one that I see typically happen a lot, and where the frustration a lot of times is, especially like at the line level and those who are executing on projects and trying to make their pieces happen. Probably that's the first one. And then I think thinking cross functionally is always important. So what I see sometimes happen is, okay, let's take that first example I gave of revenue generation or cost cutting. Let me just go to the revenue generation, go to the chief revenue officer, or the cost cutting, go to the chief operating officer. But we all know that we all need to be thinking about these things together cross functionally, and where do you need the help? So thinking about the resources you need, what might be the implication to other departments, to other
Mm-hmm.
functions. Do I need to consult, with legal, or do I need to consult with information security, or whatever it might be? That's an important piece too that we often overlook, and that's where I often see that people struggle. If it's something I can just control myself and do, it's easier to do. But when I need others' help, that's when it gets
Yeah.
harder to accomplish.
Yeah. It's so interesting. So we don't always announce this, but we're actually recording this on December 12th, 2023. So it's going to be released later. But, here at Gemba Academy, we are actually big fans of the Hoshin framework. And we actually use the X matrix, method. There's a million methods. You can use A3s, just pieces of paper, however you want to
Yeah.
do it. But the thing that I've learned over the years in practicing in this is kind of to your point of that alignment, the importance of, in lean, we call it catchball, and so
Yep.
like if you're my manager, Karen, you say, Ron, here's an objective I'd like you to look into, consider, blah, 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 or whatever. And, we go back and forth a little bit. We have a dialogue, right? And until you and I are both mutually bought in. Now, there might just be some times where you were like, okay, so I know it's going to be hard, Ron, but that's what the organization, and so you're my boss, right? And I'm gonna do it, but we do our best to get that sort of buy-in back and forth, and I see that not happen more often than not, where it's sort of just like thrown down to the lower levels and then figure it out, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's just a really crappy way of trying to lead. It's not leading.
Absolutely.
It's dictating even, yeah. So what do you think about that on that sort of that, whether you call it catchball or whatever, it's sort of that back and forth conversation on alignment?
Absolutely. So I'm going to say, if you are here and you're an individual contributor, kind of listening in, and you're thinking about your objectives, and you're going to, hopefully you have that kind of process and that kind of relationship with your leader. So we can talk about that as well. But you can start from that bottom up. Like, do I understand the strategy? Like, what is my part in this whole? What's my piece of the whole puzzle, right? What's my part that's making this move forward? And if you can even show that you're thinking strategically, I think that's a great lesson and a great thing for those who are listening in. And if you're a leader, you should be connecting and saying, this is why. Again, I go back to change management and understanding why this is important and why
Yeah.
what you're doing, how that fits in. So a lot of times when you think, especially cross-functionally, it might not be such to my benefit. If I'm doing this thing, I may not see the benefit, but the company sees the benefit. That's always harder. But but we're only going to succeed if we succeed as a whole organization or a whole company. The company won't be here, or the organization won't be here, right? So
Yeah.
we have to do that. And so understanding and really putting yourself in other people's shoes, seeing the whole big picture, I think that's a key skill. That's a key thing that sometimes we get so focused, so in the weeds, and so of what I'm doing today, I had to take your head up every once in a while. So I feel like whether you use Hoshin planning or whatever it might be, again, another key learning is just making sure you're taking the time to pick your head up, look around you, see what's going on, and bring that back. So whether you're bringing
Hmm.
that back to your manager, and they may have the answers or they may not, and they may need to bring it to their leader and up the chain.
Hmm.
So I think that is absolutely a key part
Yeah,
of
something
this.
that we've been exploring internally just over the years as we've practiced just strategic planning. There'll be some objectives, some like we use the X matrix, right? And so so we'll have an annual objective over here on the 9 o'clock, and then the 12 o'clock is the improvement priority. So these are the things that we're going to do to try to achieve those annual objectives. But I would tell you the thing that we've experimented the most, I would say, is then over there at 3 o'clock, which is, how are we going to measure this? And, who's going to do it? It's pretty straightforward. You assign an owner and secondary and all that. But how are we going to measure it? Like there's sometimes to where it's like, it's very easy. It's a number even, we're aiming for some number in a month, and you can measure it, right? And you can see how you're doing. But other times we might have some improvement priorities that are more sort of project based, like more project managey, if you will. It's not really a word, but you know what I mean? And those ones are even more difficult because then it's just more like, okay, well, when we meet at the end of January, where do we hope to be, right? And then at the end of January, where are we, right? And so there you can still get your red, green, and yellow. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how you go about, or how you've seen people go about measuring the various initiatives, whether they're projects or just actions that you need to do.
Yeah. So I have a saying, I really do believe we do these projects for a reason. We don't just do the project for the sake of the project. I would say I don't think I've ever found a time when we did, right? It was always for something. So whether that was again for it may be for you need to do it. It may be you just need to do it. This is for a government regulatory, or it's
Yeah.
something that you need for your risk management or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Mm-hmm.
whether it's you can improve your customer service. You may not see the direct relationship, but you should see that it's moving it in the right direction. So that's number one. So I always, when I do projects within the charter, that objective should be something measurable. So that's one aspect I would say that I believe that there should always be a business reason why you're doing it. And you should see again that connection to the business reason. The second way I would say is sometimes what I'll do is I would come top down. Okay. So I would come top down. So maybe, we can give an example like you want to, the objective is super top line. Let's just say like something really like highline, like customer service related, right? Where then the breakdowns of those metrics, whether it be a CSAT score, whether it be the surveys at the end of them, whatever those might
Mm-hmm.
be, and keep breaking it down and breaking down and breaking down to a
Mm-hmm.
lower and lower levels. So it's sort of like a cascading, right, of those metrics. And they should be able to get to something like I can measure this, and it should correlate to these. So these leading and lagging indicators, like it should correlate to those other higher level metrics as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's different ways to do it. But I do believe there should always be something, and we talked about the idea of SMART goals, right? It's measurable. There should always be something, and I do believe that it makes you so much more fulfilling if you understand how you're impacting the
Mm-hmm.
overall organization and the impact that you're making in what
Love
you're
it.
doing. So
Love it. Good stuff. Well, this is very good. And again, I think it's perfect timing. Hopefully companies are already, well on to their strategy for 2024. But if you're not, don't despair. Start, and, start at the top, right? And make sure that everybody's aligned up there, and then slowly work it down. I don't think there's any massive, the whole calendar year thing is such an artificial, weird thing that we do, as if like by December, you got to hit this. And it's like, why?
Yeah. Right.
It's like, we're big fans on the rolling 12-month kind of thing. Like, are we healthy? Are we trending in the right direction? Right. But, unfortunately, a lot of people listening are beholden to the month end and to the year end and all this kind of stuff for accounting reasons. But but fight that as much as you can. That'd be my advice. Go for that rolling 12-month kind of mindset more than trying to hit a particular annual objective.
Yeah. having those ways to, like, I guess, to make it real, right? To make it real, whether that's a monthly review or that quarterly review.
Yeah.
Like, not just like putting it on a shelf and forgetting about it. That's like,
Right.
again, the other tip, Ron, is as long as you have some sort of a method to keep looking at it, and okay, if you didn't hit it this month, then what do we do next? What are we going to do? Change. How are we going to change
Right.
and do things differently next month? That's a key
Right.
as well.
Good. Hey, Karen, if folks want to connect with you personally, what's the best way? Website, social media?
Sure. Well, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I post a lot about different things. So that's Karen Friedenberg. My business is Performance Improvement Consulting. We also have a LinkedIn page, and our website is piconsult.net. And all those different ways. It's great to stay in touch. Love to hear from everyone.
Yeah, so everybody go connect with Karen. So just scroll down on your app, whatever you're listening to, we'll have all the links there. And hey, I appreciate you coming back on. Let's not wait. What was it, 3 years ago? My gosh, I didn't realize. Time flies. But yeah, let's do it again down the road, and keep up the great work. And thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. Whether you've been on the continuous improvement journey for many years, or perhaps you're just getting started, Gemba Academy is here to support you. And while we're best known for our more than 1,500 Lean and Six Sigma teaching and virtual tour videos, we also have a team of experienced Lean and Six Sigma practitioners available for one-on-one coaching, as well as a variety of Lean and Six Sigma certification options. To learn more and to schedule a demo, head on over to gembaacademy.com.